Kagurabachi. That's it. That's the video. Alright, guys. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Sometimes you gotta close the door to open a window.
Chapter 75 brings us firmly back into the actions. It gave us a hearty dose of whiplash. It definitely gave me some whiplash on many such occasions. However, what I want to say is that my top 3 chapters hasn't changed. If you were expecting me to say that I have a new top 3, it hasn't changed. This is a good chapter, but it wasn't quite that good as far as I'm concerned. But personally, I'm just a sucker for those character-driven moments. This is a good chapter, but it's more actiony. But yeah, regardless, Chapter 75 opens up with Samura, Chihiro, and Hirohiko all activating their blades. And while we see this happening, Iori is looking to the sky with tears falling down her cheeks as she sees her dad for the first time in years. Samura, wasting zero time, uses Crow, which we actually finally get an explanation for in this chapter, but I'll get to that in a minute, because we see Toto and Hiro both staring down Samura, and there's only one thing on Hirohiko's mind right now: fighting. And this becomes a little bit more relevant a little bit later on, so we'll get into that. But Hirohiko mentions how Samura probably wasn't anticipating his daughter being here, and thus this is more than likely unsettling for her. But before any words or more thoughts come from Hirohiko's head and his mouth, Toto was beheaded in one fell swoop. And this page turn had me freaking the fuck out, because Hiru also gets beheaded. Yeah, this whole thing, completely and utterly reminiscent of Chainsaw Man as far as I'm concerned. Now, obviously, this was a bait and switch from Hokusono, so I'd be lying straight to your face if I said this page turn didn't remind me of something from Chainsaw Man. Like, it caught me really off guard, to be honest with you. However, it's where we get the explanation for how Crow works, because Chihiro explains how when Samura draws Tobimune, he uses these dancing feathers to sense his surroundings. Now, one of Tobimune's powers is Crow. He can swap locations with any one of these dancing feathers. Now, if you're a fan of Jujutsu Kaisen, then you know just how brutal an ability like this can be. Think Todo and Boogie Woogie. Also, by the way, if you're a fan of Jujutsu Kaisen, I just dropped an absolutely colossal video, almost 3 hours, going all over the details of everything that happened in the Shinjuku Showdown, so go check that out. Anyways, we also see the re-emergence of Kuro Shred. Kuro Shred, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe was last seen in chapters 14 and 15. I don't think we've seen it since this. Now, if you don't remember, Kuro Shred is basically just Chihiro creates a mini Kuro that allows Chihiro to send around 20-ish mini contact slashes to his opponent, and he just scatters these fishies all around the place. Now, we will swing back around to this in a second, because we get this really interesting interaction between Samura and Iori. Now, I am going to try my best not to glaze Hokusono a bit too much with his writing of Samura and Iori, because I'm sure you're all sick of hearing me literally choking out. I'm not even going to finish that sentence, Jesus Christ. I'm not even going to finish that one, but I'm sure you're all sick of me glazing this dude's writing. But Samura questions and realizes that the seal has been broken, and he questions if the Masumi did this, to which Ro answers they had nothing to do with this. This was all Iori. Now, this is where that aforementioned complexity comes out within Samura, as I've gone over in the past couple of videos here, because without even turning to his daughter or asking where she is or how she is, Samura's response was redo the seal. Zero questions asked from Samura except for an emotional outburst from Iori. Quote, "Do you have nothing to say to me after such a long time?" End quote. This outburst causes a grimmest look on Samura's face. Now, this is just pure speculation and headcanon on my part, but here, Samura, as far as I'm concerned, didn't actually know Iori was here, and this face is him realizing that Iori's here, and he's been caught red-handed, telling the Masumi to put that seal back where it came from. This could be possibly Hokusono playing on the blindness of Samura once again, as he did a couple of chapters ago, where he couldn't see the graffiti on his home. However, this is where the reveal comes in that Hirohiko isn't actually dead. And in fact, we're on some Hiroko Shinji type shit. There's been a lot of comparisons that I've made to Bleach throughout this series, and I'm getting it right now, because his severed head starts talking. Severed heads don't typically do that, freaking Samura out as Samura feels the Kumiyuri melt away from his hands, as we actually saw him in this panel leaning down to pick up the blade here. Now, everyone is affected by this illusion that Hirohiko has created. This Hokusono depicts the building itself seeming to melt or starting to wobble, even knocking Iori over slightly here as she has to balance on one leg. And we're treated to these puppets floating ominously as they pour this jug of what I can only describe or would assume would be sake. Now, I actually love the way the paneling works on this because he incorporates this wibbly wobbly stuff all over the panels, and I love the way Hokuzono does this. He did something similar a few chapters back. I say a few chapters, it's like plus 30 chapters now, where Shiba actually burned a panel, which I thought was cool. It's kind of like it breaks the fourth wall, breaks your immersion. Now, we actually got to see these floating puppets way back when in chapter 57. Now, Hokuzono has the opportunity to do something absolutely startlingly batshit crazy. He could literally just turn around and hit us with the "it was all a dream" moment and have the past 30 odd chapters just be an illusion from the moment he used Kamiyori back in the chapter house. Listen, it's incredibly unlikely to happen, but I'm just saying he could go absolutely crazy with it. This could all just be an illusion just to fuck with Chihiro. We are in some dreamscape type shit right now. Now, there's a few things here to note. Chihiro notes how Hirohiko made the first move. Now, obviously, Samura's cuts were an illusion, but Samura himself, who is a seasoned veteran, notes how the blade itself produced the sensation of slicing. Chihiro notes how Samura was probably taken by surprise and how Iori must have distracted him. Now, while I do agree on that sentiment, it is worth noting a couple of things here. One, Hirohiko was able to activate the ability before Samura could even notice, which, even if he was distracted by his daughter, still impressive even on itself. Like, we're talking, this is a dude that's a seasoned war veteran here. And two, last video I mentioned how these blades fighting each other might not be as straightforward as we might think here, because they could match up badly with each other. Because remember, these blades, they're made to fight against other people and not each other. I think we're seeing this in action now because Samura's senses have been thrown way off by the Kumiyori's abilities here, down to the very sensation of actually slicing someone. Now, considering Samura reacts primarily to sound within his fights, this could present a huge problem for him later down the line. Now, I really hope Hokuzono isn't serving to set up a Momo moment like in Bleach here. In fact, I'm going to put out a little prediction here. This is probably praying this doesn't come together, but right now in the world, I'm predicting Hirohiko causes either Iori or Samura to kill one or the other while under the influence of the Kamiyori. Given Samura's blindness and Iori, who actively closes her eyes while fighting, they are both susceptible to some illusionary shenanigans, and I'll circle back around to that in a little bit. Now, all the other goons on this roof here are completely unaffected by Hirohiko's abilities here, who are now rushing to attack Iori, who is still reeling from the Kamiyori ability. Now here, Chihiro makes an incredibly interesting choice. Instead of defending Iori, he actually forces that role and responsibility upon Samura. We rightfully should be doing this, to be honest with you. He owes Iori this much at the very most. Thinking to himself, Mr. Samura, no excuses, as he shouts, "Protect your daughter." And I think this action right here is extremely clever, not only from Chihiro, but also from Hokuzono, because Chihiro doing this now ensures Samura will have to stay with Iori to protect her, because he's leaving, and thus a much long-needed discussion will happen or have to occur between the pair of them, which I'm very happy about. As I said, I'm a sucker for these character moments, and these two characters interacting with each other, it's just piece de la resistance. I love it. But this also means Chihiro and Hirohiko are now free to partake in their own separate shenanigans on the lower floors. And just like that, Hokuzono efficiently just sectioned off everyone into their own little substations that we'll be able to see unfold individually and reconnect together when Hokuzono is ready to bring us all back. Anyway, Chihiro goes after the sorcerer, which I found interesting given that within Chihiro's inner brain thoughts here, he refers to Hirohiko by name, but now he's referring to him simply as the sorcerer. It's almost like he won't give Hirohiko the time of day to publicly acknowledge his name, which I find quite funny, to be honest with you. I like that petty energy. Now, we see Hirohiko alongside Toto, who are talking about how useful the Kamiyori is, and Hirohiko is completely and utterly focused on one thing and one thing only: the fight. As I mentioned earlier, despite framing it as wanting to just get Samura's daughter, Hirohiko views this as a game he just will not quit, and that boss fight that he wants to fight is Chihiro. And right now, Hirohiko is on his third attempt at trying to best him. He's essentially playing Elden Ring on hard difficulty right now, but it turns out Chihiro is already on his way to this fight. You see that Kuro Shred that Chihiro activated a little bit earlier wasn't for the goons on the roof, it was for detection to find Hirohiko, who we also now come to find out Chihiro was aware of the Kumiyori's abilities, and that is why he uses Nishigi to strengthen his inner ears. Now, this gives us some vital information that the Kumiyori targets the inner ears for its abilities to have an effect. Now, I mentioned earlier a little prediction for how Hirohiko could actually maybe use this power later down the line to potentially fuck up Samura and Iori. Now, with this information being revealed to us, it lets us know that the Kumiyuri is a really good counter to Samura, a man who relies on sound to fight, and also his daughter, a woman who closes her eyes actively to use her ears, just like her daddy. So I'm not really fucking with how that situation is going to play out right now. But it also does somewhat confirm a theory that I, myself, and many others within the community have had, and that is that Chihiro's Enten serves as a direct counter to the other enchanted blades, because Chihiro using Nishiki to strengthen his ears to combat this ability, and given the fact that Enten was made after the war, it's highly plausible that this blade holds the keys to beating the rest of the enchanted blades, so I guess we'll see. But to further my prediction, Hirohiko says something very, very interesting. Don't worry, I'll go after the daughter, and this time I'll win. End quote. Now, from this moment on, I am going to be honest with you, I'm extremely suspect and skeptical of every action that Mr. Hirohiko is going to take. Now, considering that we have a Kumiyori ability flying around and illusionary shenanigans going on. Now, Hirohiko and Chihiro clash once more, with Hiro telling Chihiro, you better actually try to kill me this time. Now, this is where the chapter gets mildly more interesting for me personally. We have ourselves a little flashback to just before Samura arrived on the rooftop. How do we know? Because Owl is still right there in the sky, and obviously now he's arrived on the rooftop, all the skies have cleared. But Yora explains to Hishaku here that Seiji Samura is the Hishaku's most powerful weapon right now. We must wield him wisely and then sacrifice him for the greatest possible gain. One key to sealing Samura's fate is his daughter. Now, depending on how the battle in Kyoto is going, we'll fire 2 arrows. Now, the way Yura speaks every time he's on the panels, he speaks in the most cryptic ways. It's like he sort of knows what's coming. It's really interesting how Hokuzono is choosing meticulously to put this man's dialogues together, and now obviously it's done for a reason, and every time he appears on the panels just makes me crave more and more of Yura on screen. Now it's revealed that where Yura is standing right now is actually directly above the Shinoichi and the Kaminobi headquarters. But I noticed this little detail. In chapter 71, Yura tells Samura how in a few years from now a disaster will befall the country, and we are shown an image of a city in ruins as a result of the Shinoichi. Now I wonder if the scene that we were shown back then is actually where Yura and Hishaku are stood right now, because the setting seems familiar. Obviously, it's city and skyscrapers, and we know someone can actually use the Shinoichi even though the Swordmaster is still alive, because we saw that very thing happen with Kiora. And in fact, Yura was actually using Kiora as a guinea pig to see if the sword could be used, and given the mental strength that Yura wields, as noted by Chihiro in chapter 32, it's very, very possible that Yura might be trying to wield the Shinoichi a little bit early and, potentially, unveil some sort of powers from that without killing the Swordmaster, but resisting the mind control from the Swordmaster. I would be willing to bet that Yura could do this, similar to how Kiora did, but with a better effect. But all in all, these developments make me feel like we're moving very, very fast within the story, and I've seen a few folk in the community sort of fearing an early end to the Kagurabachi series, and honestly, I can't see it personally. I would estimate that Hokuzono still has a long way to go within the story before we close out. There's still a lot of mysteries to unravel here, but as always, this chapter was a beauty, a solid 8 out of 10 for me personally. But anyways, that is everything from me. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and as always, shout out to the members who support the channel. I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Much fucking love. Big fucking kisses. Peace. Just had 2 endings. Damn, weird. Anyway, go watch that Jujutsu Kaisen video, by the way. That's like my love letter. That's my opus right there.